The fire crackled softly in the quiet night. Jake sat beside it, his hands warming over the flames. He had traveled a long way, crossing deserts and ruins on this strange alien planet. He was tired, hungry, and alone, but alive. He opened a small metal box and pulled out a piece of cooked meat and some dry bread. Steam rose into the cool night air. Jake smiled. Finally, he whispered, a quiet meal. But the quiet didn't last. A sharp sound came from the shadows like a foot hitting a stone. Jake froze. His eyes scanned the darkness. Something moved fast and low. Before he could react, a small hand shot out of the shadows, grabbed his food, and vanished into the dark. What the? Jake stood up quickly, shocked. He caught a glimpse, just for a second, of a small figure running away. Thin legs, no shoes, and a long tail. It wasn't human. Jake grabbed his flashlight and followed. He didn't yell or run. He moved quietly, carefully. The ruins of the alien town surrounded him, broken walls, cracked streets, and shattered windows. A place long forgotten. The small figure dashed between the ruins, glancing back once. Jake saw wide glowing eyes filled with fear. The child. It was an alien child, tiny, maybe 7 or 8 years old. Dirty, skinny, and fast. Jake followed the trail of small footprints through the dust. He stepped over rubble and under fallen beams. His flashlight flickered, then steadied. The child disappeared behind a half-collapsed wall. Jake slowed down. He didn't want to scare the child. He just wanted to understand. Why would a child risk stealing food from a stranger in the middle of the night? He reached the wall and peeked over it. There, in a small hole in the ground, the child disappeared. A hiding place. Maybe a shelter. Maybe a home. Jake waited for a moment. He listened. He heard quiet breathing. And coughing. Soft, weak coughing. He carefully stepped down into the hole, keeping his hands open to show he meant no harm. His boots hit soft ground. The air smelled of old stone, damp cloth, and sickness. In the dim light, he saw the child kneeling beside a figure lying on the floor. It was a woman, an alien woman. Her skin was pale and cracked. Her clothes were torn and dirty. Her eyes were half closed, and she looked too weak to move. She coughed again, her chest shaking. The child offered her the stolen food, tearing it into small pieces and pushing it toward her mouth. Jake stepped closer, slowly. The child turned sharply, shielding the woman with his small arms. His face showed fear, but also something else. Desperation. Jake knelt. Hey, he said softly. It's okay. I'm not here to hurt you. The child didn't answer. He just watched, breathing fast, like a wild animal trapped in a corner. Jake reached into his backpack and pulled out a small water bottle. He rolled it across the floor gently. For her, he said. The child looked at the bottle, then at Jake. Finally, he picked it up and helped the woman drink. She sipped the water slowly, like it was the first thing she'd tasted in days. Jake sat down, watching in silence. So this was why the food was stolen. The boy didn't steal for himself. He stole to save her. Jake looked around the small shelter. There was nothing. No food, no blankets, no medicine. Just broken rocks, dirty rags, and pain. He felt something heavy in his chest. Not anger. Not fear. Sadness. Double quotes. How long have you two been here? Jake asked gently. No answer. What happened to your people? Still silence. But Jake could guess. The ruined town, the silence, the sickness. Maybe war had come. Maybe the others had left or died. And this child. He had stayed with his mother. While everyone else walked away, Jake leaned back against the wall. He opened his pack again and pulled out a small energy bar. He unwrapped it and placed it slowly on the floor between them. I'll leave this here, he said. I'm not going to take anything from you. I'll be outside if you need help. He stood up and backed away toward the entrance, but as he turned to go, A small voice stopped him. Wait. Jake turned. The child held the energy bar in his hand. He looked scared, but also hopeful. Can you help my mother? Jake stepped closer again, his face serious. I can try, but I need to know what happened. And I need to get her some real medicine. The child nodded slowly. Jake knelt beside the woman, checked her breathing, her skin, her pulse. She was in bad shape. Maybe just a few days left without help. He looked at the child again. I need to leave. I'll bring supplies, food, medicine. I promise I'll come back. The child said nothing. He just nodded once. Jake climbed out of the hole and walked back through the ruins. The night air was cold now. But inside him, a fire had started. A small child had stolen from him, but he couldn't blame him, because that child had done it out of love, and Jake knew. Deep in his heart, he couldn't walk away. The sun had not yet risen, but a soft gray light had started to touch the broken buildings. Jake didn't sleep that night. He sat near the hole where the child had vanished. His pack rested beside him, filled with whatever food and supplies he had left. His eyes stayed open, fixed on the dark space below. He had seen many sad things during his travels. Abandoned towns, empty homes, dead cities. But nothing felt like this. Not like that child's face, so young, yet already tired of life. Or the mother's cough, each sound like a knife through silence. When morning light finally reached the ruins, Jake stood and spoke gently. Toward the hole. I brought help. No answer. He waited. Then, slowly, a pair of glowing eyes peeked out from behind the stones. The child, still afraid, still watching. Jake didn't move. He placed a wrapped packet of food and a bottle of clean water on the ground. Then, from his pack, he pulled out a small glowing heat stick, something to keep the cold away. He turned it on and rolled it toward the hole. Warmth spread through the dusty air. The child stared at it. His hand reached out, touched it, and quickly pulled back. Then, he touched it again, longer this time. He held it tightly, like it was gold. After a long silence, the boy whispered, "Come in," but slow. Jake nodded. Carefully, he lowered himself back into the hiding place. What he saw made his heart tighten. The mother lay curled under thin blankets. Her skin had turned gray-blue. Her hands trembled when she tried to sit up. Jake knelt beside her. "Don't move," he said softly. "Let me help." She looked at him with tired, watery eyes, but said nothing. Her lips were cracked. Her face was sunken. The child sat beside her, still guarding her like a soldier, but with shaking arms. Jake unwrapped a soft cloth, dipped it in water, and cleaned her face. Then, he opened a small medical box, just the basics. Painkillers, fever tablets, ointments. "I'm not a doctor," Jake said, "but I can try." He gently lifted her arm and pressed a small patch of medicine to her skin. Her breath caught, but she didn't cry out. She was used to pain. Jake gave her some warm broth from his flask. She sipped it slowly, like it hurt to swallow. The child watched every move, still silent. "What's your name?" Jake asked him. No answer. Jake tried again. "I'm Jake." The boy hesitated, then whispered, "Torek." Jake smiled. "Good to meet you, Torek." He looked back at the woman. "And her?" Torek touched her hand gently. "Mara, she's my mother." Jake nodded. He looked around the tiny shelter again. The walls were made of broken stone and trash. The floor was cold dirt. A thin piece of cloth hung at the entrance like a curtain. No light, no warmth, no hope. "How long have you been hiding here?" Jake asked. "Many moons," Torek said, "since the sky turned red." And the others ran. Jake paused. He had heard about the war. The alien cities that were hit by plasma storms. Survivors fled. Some were rescued. Others were left behind. "Why didn't anyone come for you?" Jake asked quietly. Torek lowered his head. "They said she was weak, Useless. She could not walk fast. And you stayed? I had to. She's my mother. Jake felt a lump in his throat. This small child had faced war, hunger, and fear, but never left his mother's side. You're a brave kid, Jake said. Tarek didn't smile. I was hungry. That's why I took your food. Jake looked at the boy's thin arms and hollow cheeks. I'm glad you did, he said. If you hadn't, I never would have found you. Tarek blinked. You're not mad? Jake shook his head. No, you saved her the only way you could. Tarek looked at his mother. She was sleeping now, her breath slow but steady. The medicine had helped. Jake stood. I need to go again. I don't have enough food or stronger medicine. But I know a place. It's risky, but I'll go. Tarek stood too. Will you come back? Jake looked him in the eyes. I swear. Before he climbed out of the shelter, Jake placed something at the entrance. A small metal device with blinking lights. A sensor, he said. If anyone comes near, it'll beep. You'll have a few seconds to hide or run. Tarek nodded, holding his mother's hand tightly. Jake looked back one last time. 2 lives forgotten by the world. Left in the dark to die, but now someone knew they existed. And someone cared. Jake walked into the morning light, a new mission burning in his chest. He wasn't just helping strangers anymore. He was fighting for a mother and her brave little son. The sun was already high when Jake returned. Sweat rolled down his face as he walked through the ruins, his arms full of supplies, more food, stronger medicine, a clean blanket, and a small solar-powered heater. His back ached. His feet hurt. But he didn't stop. Something inside him had changed. He wasn't just helping anymore. He was angry, not at the child, not at the mother, but at the world that left them behind. Jake reached the shelter, tapped twice on the side of the stone. It was the signal he'd told Tarek. It's me. There was silence. Then the cloth door lifted. Tarek peeked out. His face lit up, not with a smile, but with deep, quiet relief. You came back. The boy whispered. Jake crouched and smiled. Told you I would. He climbed down, and as his eyes adjusted to the dim light, he noticed something different. Air felt warmer now. Not from the heater, but from something else. Hope. Mahara was awake, sitting up slightly with support from the stone wall. Her eyes were clearer. She still looked weak, but alive. Jake gently placed the supplies down and handed Tarek a small meal. Warm this up and feed her slowly. Tarek got to work without hesitation. Jake looked at Mara. You look better. Her voice was raspy. Because of you. He knelt beside her. I brought real medicine this time. It should help with the fever and pain. She looked away. Why are you doing this? Jake paused, then said softly, because no one else did. Mara's eyes filled with quiet pain. Not from her illness, but from memories. I asked for help, she said. So many times when the sky turned red, when the food ran out. When I fell sick, Jake listened closely. They told me I was slow, broken, that I would only slow the others down. Even my own brother left me behind. He said he would send help, but he never did. She coughed, and Jake handed her a flask of warm water. I had friends. Family, she continued. But in the end, when things got hard, they all ran. Jake sat back. He felt his jaw tighten. He had seen soldiers leave wounded behind during war. He had seen people step over starving children on Earth. But hearing it now, seeing Mara suffer while her child begged strangers for scraps, it burned. No one cares about the weak, Mara whispered. Jake shook his head slowly. That's not true. She looked at him. Then why are we still here? Why did my son have to steal to keep me alive? Jake's voice was calm, but strong. Because the wrong people were in charge. Because cowards left you. But not everyone is like them. He leaned forward. I'm not like them. Tarek returned with a warm bowl. He helped his mother drink. Every small sip brought life back to her face. Jake handed over a fresh blanket and gently wrapped it around her shoulders. Then he turned to Torek. "You've kept her alive all this time?" The boy nodded slowly. Jake smiled. "You're stronger than most adults I know." Torek looked down. "I was scared." Jake rested a hand on his shoulder. "Being scared and still doing the right thing, that's real bravery." They sat together in silence for a while. The wind outside howled softly through the cracks in the stone. But inside, the shelter felt warmer now. Jake reached into his bag again. He pulled out something small, a tiny hand mirror. "I found this in an old store," he said, handing it to Mara. "Thought you might like it." She took it carefully, as if it might break just from her touch. She stared at her own face. It was tired, worn, but alive. A quiet tear rolled down her cheek. "Thank you," she said. Jake nodded. Then his face grew serious. "I need to go back out again. I found signs of a patrol near the edge of the ruins." Torek froze. "Are they looking for us?" "Maybe," Jake said. "Or maybe for something else. Either way, I need to be ready." He stood and looked at both of them. "I won't let them take you, and I won't let you die here." Mara smiled for the first time, a soft, faint smile, but real. "Why do you care so much?" she asked. Jake looked into her eyes. "Because someone has to." He climbed out of the hole, scanned the skies, and headed back into the unknown. Behind him, two hearts beat with hope, for the first time in a long time. They were not alone. The night returned, heavy and quiet. Jake crouched on top of a broken rooftop, watching the edge of the ruins through his binoculars. The wind blew dust across the dead city like ghosts whispering warnings. He had seen them, 3 figures in dark armor, moving slowly through the streets, not human, not friendly. They weren't looking for shelter. They were hunters, scavenger patrols. Jake had seen their kind before. Alien warbands that searched for leftovers, old tech, lost weapons, and the weak. If they found Torek and Mara, they wouldn't help, they'd take, or worse. Jake slid off the rooftop silently and hurried back toward the shelter. His footsteps were quick but careful. One mistake could lead them right to the mother and child. As he reached the entrance, he tapped 3 times sharp and fast. Torek opened the cloth door. His eyes were wide. "You saw them too?" the boy asked. Jake nodded. "We don't have much time inside." Mara looked up weakly. She tried to sit, but Jake raised his hand. "No, save your strength." He handed Torek a small sack. "Put the food and medicine in here. Only the essentials." Torek obeyed without question. Jake then reached into his coat and pulled out a compact blaster. It was old, half-rusted, but still worked. Torek stared at it. "You'll fight them?" he whispered. Jake's jaw tightened. "If I have to." He knelt by Mara. "There's a tunnel under these ruins. An old sewer path. If I lead them away, you and Torek can escape through it." Mara shook her head slowly. "You'll die." Jake gave a quiet smile. "I've faced worse, and besides, I've got a plan." Suddenly, a snap echoed outside. All 3 froze. Footsteps. Close. Jake motioned for silence and crept toward the entrance. He peeked out through a crack. The armored figures were here. They had flashlights, long weapons. Their helmets made them look like machines. Jake slipped outside and whispered to Torek, "Seal the door behind me. If I don't come back in 10 minutes, take your mother and go." Torek's voice shook, but Jake placed a hand on his shoulder. "Be brave, like you always have." He slipped into the darkness. Moments later, Jake moved fast through the ruins, making noise on purpose. He knocked over a barrel, kicked a stone, and then shouted just loud enough, "Hey, over here." The scavengers heard him. They turned and gave chase. Blaster bolts flew past him, lighting the night with deadly blue flashes. Jake ducked behind a wall, returned fire once, then sprinted to another alley. He led them deeper into the maze of ruins. Away from the shelter, his lungs burned, his legs ached. But he didn't stop. He had to buy them time, back at the shelter. Torek held his mother's hand tightly. The small bag was packed. The heater was off. Everything was ready, except their hearts. Mara looked at her son. "If he doesn't return." "He will," Torek whispered. "He promised." She smiled. Sadly, sometimes even promises break. Torek shook his head. Not his. Meanwhile, Jake reached the edge of the city. He stopped and turned. Only one scavenger was close now. The other two had split off. Jake aimed. The blaster shook in his hand, but he fired. The scavenger screamed, falling to the ground. Sparks flew from his armor, but now Jake was exposed. Another blast hit the wall beside him. Debris flew. He dove behind a rusted vehicle. His chest rose and fell fast. He was running out of time. Then he heard a sound behind him. Footsteps. Two. Light for a scavenger. He turned quickly. Torek. The boy crouched beside him, holding a glowing ball, one of Jake's signal flares. Jake's eyes widened. "What are you doing?" Torek didn't answer. He threw the flare high into the air. A burst of light blinded the scavengers for a second. "Now!" Torek yelled. Jake grabbed the boy's hand, and they ran back toward the sewer tunnel entrance. Reached it in seconds. Jake ripped open the grate and helped Torek crawl in first. Then he jumped down behind him. Torek turned. "What about my mom?" "She's already inside," Jake said, breathless. "I came back for you." Torek looked shocked. "You came back?" Jake nodded. "I promised." Deep underground. The tunnel was cold and wet, but safe for now. Mara was resting against the wall, wrapped in a thick blanket. She opened her eyes as Jake and Torek arrived. "You're both alive," she whispered. Jake smiled. "We made it." They sat together. In the dark, breathing hard. Alive. Safe. For now. Jake looked at both of them and said, "We can't stay in this city. Tomorrow we move." "To where?" Torek asked. Jake looked up toward the tunnel ceiling. "Somewhere no one will ever call you a burden again." And in that cold tunnel, under a ruined world, a new family had just survived the night, together. The tunnel was cold, not just in temperature, but in feeling. Water dripped from the ceiling. The air smelled of rust and time. Every sound echoed like it didn't want to be forgotten. Jake sat beside the small fire he had built using scraps of dry cloth and wires. Its tiny flames fought against the darkness, like he was fighting against death. Mara lay close to the fire. Wrapped in two blankets, her face was pale again, her lips dry. Her chest moved up and down, but slowly. Too slowly. Torek sat beside her, holding her hand. His fingers were shaking. "She's not waking up," the boy whispered. Jake moved closer. He checked her pulse. It was weak. Too weak. "She was getting better," Jake muttered. "Why now?" He reached into his bag and pulled out the last dose of pain medicine and a small injector. His hands moved fast but careful. He placed the injector to her neck and pressed the button. A quiet hiss. Then silence. Torek looked at Jake with wide eyes. "Is she dying?" Jake didn't answer right away. He stared at Mara's face, so thin, so tired. Her body had been fighting too long with too little, even with the help Jake gave. It might not be enough. Jake closed his eyes for a second. His mind went somewhere else. Years ago. A battlefield. Another dying woman. A human this time. Jake had held her hand, just like Torek was doing now. He had made promises that night too. And failed. Jake opened his eyes again and clenched his jaw. "Not this time. She's not dying," he said firmly. "Not if I can help it." He stood up and grabbed his flashlight. Torek blinked. "Where are you going?" "There's an old evac bunker near the edge of the tunnel system," Jake said. "Might still have emergency kits, real ones. But it's dangerous outside." Jake looked down at the boy. so is waiting here while she slips away. He knelt and placed both hands on Torek's shoulders. Keep her warm. Feed her broth every hour. If her fever rises again, put the wet cloth on her head, just like I showed you. Torek nodded fast. I will. Jake gave him a small flashlight. If anything happens, knock on the pipe 3 times, I'll hear it. He turned to Mara one last time. Then whispered, don't go, please. And with that, he ran into the dark. Minutes turned into hours. Torek did everything Jake told him. He gave his mother small sips of broth. He changed the wet cloth. He whispered stories in her ear to keep her close. But Mara didn't move. Her chest rose. And sometimes it didn't fall right away. Torek began to cry. I'm sorry, he whispered, holding her hand tighter. I should have found better food. I should have run faster that night. The fire flickered. Then, Mara's eyes opened, just a little. Torek. His heart jumped. Mom, you're awake. But her voice was faint, like wind passing through a crack. You're safe. That's all that matters. No. Don't say goodbye. He cried. She smiled weakly. If I don't make it, stay with the human. He has a good heart. No, Mom, you'll make it, please. Meanwhile, Jake sprinted through the side tunnels, breathing hard. His legs ached. His lungs burned. He reached the old evac bunker, a metal door half buried in debris. He slammed his shoulder into it. Once, twice. On the third try, it opened. Inside, everything was dark. Dust covered the walls. But his flashlight found what he needed, a locked supply case. He broke it open with a pipe. Inside, antibiotics, clean injectors, thermal packs, and nutrient shots. Thank you, he whispered to no one. He turned to leave, but a shadow moved behind him. A low growl echoed in the bunker. Jake froze. Something had followed him. Not a scavenger. A beast back in the tunnel. Torek stared at his mother. Her breathing was shallow again. Please, Jake, he whispered. Come back. He knocked on the pipe. Once, twice, 3 times. No answer. Back in the bunker. Jake fired his blaster, dodging sharp claws. The beast roared and slammed into a wall. Jake threw a flare, blinding it for seconds. He grabbed the supply kit and ran back into the tunnel. He didn't stop, didn't look back. He reached the shelter. Bleeding from his arm, out of breath, Torek shouted, Jake! Jake dropped beside Mara and opened the kit. He injected her with the strongest antibiotic. Placed thermal packs on her chest. Whispered, You're not dying today. Not like this. Not while your son still believes in you. Torek held her other hand tightly. They waited. 1 minute. 2. Then, her breathing steadied. Jake closed his eyes and finally allowed himself to exhale. She's okay? Torek asked. Jake nodded slowly. She's still with us. They sat there in the quiet, listening to her breathe. The sound was soft, but it was life. The fire crackled softly in the heart of the dark tunnel. But for the first time, the warmth didn't just come from the fire. It came from something else. Something deeper. Jake sat against the wall, his coat draped over Torek, who had fallen asleep with his head resting on his mother's shoulder. The boy had fought sleep for hours, but his little body couldn't fight anymore. Mara was awake now. Alive. Her hand gently stroked her son's hair, her fingers still trembling, but not from sickness. From emotion. She looked up at Jake. You saved him, she whispered. Jake looked at her and gave a quiet smile. He saved you first. Mara blinked slowly. But you stayed, you fought. You didn't even know us. Jake looked down at the fire. His voice was soft. Maybe I didn't know you, but I knew what it felt like to be left behind. Mara tilted her head slightly, eyes full of silent questions. Jake didn't say more. He didn't need to, because pain knows pain, and she understood. She leaned back against the wall, weak but resting peacefully. Your kindness. It feels strange. Jake raised an eyebrow. Strange? Where I'm from, she said slowly, kindness is a mask. A tool. People give only to get something back. Jake didn't answer right away. Then he said, then maybe it's time someone gave without asking for anything. Mara turned her eyes toward him. Why are you really here? Jake met her gaze. Because I saw a boy risking his life for someone he loved. And I saw a mother fighting to stay alive. Not for herself, but for her child. That's worth protecting. A tear slipped from Mara's eye. She wiped it quickly. I don't like crying. Jake smiled. That makes two of us. For a while, silence filled the space again, but it was no longer empty. It was calm. Safe. Then Mara spoke again, this time in a quieter, more fragile voice. I thought I'd never feel safe again. Jake didn't move closer, but he said gently, you are now. Later that night, Mara grew cold again. Jake noticed her shivering beneath the blanket. The small heater was dying, and the fire was too low to warm them all. Jake stood up and grabbed the last heat pack from his bag. But Mara shook her head. Turek needs it more. He's warm under my coat, Jake replied. I don't want you to freeze either, she said. Jake knelt beside her. Then share my warmth. She looked confused. He unzipped his jacket and gently lifted the edge of her blanket. I've done this before, he said. Body heat saves lives. For a moment, she hesitated. Then, slowly she allowed him to sit beside her close enough to feel his warmth. He placed the heat pack between them, wrapped the blanket over both their shoulders. She leaned her head back, eyes heavy. Strange again. What is? He asked. Mara closed her eyes. To be held. By someone who wants nothing from me. Jake looked at her. He said nothing. But inside, something stirred. Not romance, not desire. Something older, deeper. Human. Real. Connection. The next morning, Turek woke up first. He blinked at the sight of his mother sleeping peacefully, her hand gently resting on Jake's arm. Jake was asleep too, sitting upright, still guarding them both. Turek smiled quietly. Then, for the first time in what felt like forever, he whispered to himself, we're not alone anymore. The sky above the ruins had turned red again. But this time, it wasn't from war. It was from warning. Ships hovered in the distance, low, slow, and searching. One of them sent down a loudspeaker message in a rough alien voice. All survivors must report. Weak or unwanted will be removed. Jake clenched his jaw. Turek hid behind him, clutching Mara's hand. She was standing now barely, but she stood. Jake had led them out of the tunnels at dawn. It was time to leave the ruined city. He had a path mapped out to an old human outpost in the hills. But now, patrol ships had landed. 3 armored soldiers stepped onto the broken street, their weapons raised, scanning the area. Jake didn't. Hide. He stepped forward. Mara whispered. They're from the cleansing squads. They don't save people. They remove what they call burdens. Jake didn't blink. Then they picked the wrong family to threaten. The soldiers approached. One of them raised a scanner. It beeped when pointed at Mara. Female sick. Body weak, deemed unfit. Another scanned Turek. Small, underfed. Potential, but low. Strength. Recommend separation. Then they looked at Jake. Human, one said flatly. You don't belong here. Why protect them? Jake stepped forward. His voice was calm but cold. I belong wherever I choose to stand. The soldier tilted his head. Move aside. They are not useful to the colony. Jake didn't move. Instead, he took one slow step closer. They are mine. The soldier's eyes narrowed behind his mask. What do you mean? Jake spoke louder this time. The wind carried his words across the broken ground. They are my responsibility, my family. You touch them, you go through me. The soldiers laughed short, dry, robotic. Then one raised his weapon. Bad move. Jake's blaster was already in his hand. He fired once quick, precise. The soldier's weapon exploded in his hand. He screamed and fell back. The other two stepped forward, but Jake's aim didn't shake. "Try me," he said. "Please." There was a long silence. Then the lead soldier spoke again, but softer. "You would claim a dying alien woman and a starving child?" Jake's eyes burned like fire. "Yes, because they're worth more than all of you combined." The soldiers didn't reply. Their scanners blinked again. "New ID record, Human Unit 219, Guardian Class, accepted." One of them stepped back and touched his cum. A voice answered from above. "Leave them. Human has claimed them under Earth's protection. Code." The soldiers turned without another word and walked back toward the ship. Jake stood tall until the last one was gone. Only then did he lower his weapon. Torek ran to him. "You did it," he said, eyes wide. Jake knelt and ruffled his hair. "They won't bother you again." Mara slowly walked toward him. Tears in her eyes, she didn't speak. She just placed her hand on his chest and leaned in, resting her forehead on his shoulder. "Thank you," she whispered. "Not just for saving us, but for choosing us." Jake placed his arm around her gently. "You were never broken," he said. "The world was just blind." Later that day, the three of them walked out of the ruins together. A man, a mother, a child. No longer strangers. No longer forgotten. As they stepped into the sunlight, Jake turned back one last time to the ruins behind them. Then he looked forward. "From now on," he said softly, "we move together." In a world where the weak were thrown away, one human stood, not as a soldier, but as a shelter. And in the end, it wasn't blood or power that saved them. It was love.